Hello ladies and latents, welcome to another video. The Blue Bomber is officially back. Been upwards of a decade since the last game, but Megaman 11 is finally delivering the long-awaited goods. Between this and potentially a Megaman X9 that was apparently recently hinted at, things are really looking up for Rock and his, do we call X his little brother? I don't know what the proper familial relation would be there. Anyways, Megaman 11 is coming relatively soon, so I came up with the crazy and I'm sure totally original idea of downloading the Mega Man Legacy Collection and revisiting the entire classic series. Alright, in all seriousness, I've had a real penchant for Mega Man for most of my life, and to this day, the only videos I've made on the series are terrible and old. Like, does anyone still remember the X Collection reviews I did back when I was like 16? I sure do. I'm embarrassed that I do. Over the past few weeks, I've gone through the Mega Man Legacy Collection 1 and 2, and I've played every game in the classic series from front to back. While I was playing, I took some notes, and if you follow me on Twitter, you probably saw my thoughts on the series as I was playing it, among, you know, all the Love Live posts. With this video here, I'm going to do the obvious, take my thoughts on the classic series, and give my personal ranking. I'll be talking everything from level and boss design to the look and sound of the games. We do have a lot to cover here, so I'll try not to dwell too much on the finer details, but I'll do my best to get my point across. And because my opinion is shit, this is by no means an entirely objective take on the series, so you really shouldn't take this as a statement of fact. The one at the top of this list was just the game I had the most fun with, so on and so forth all the way down the list. All that out of the way, let's get rolling. So I'm just gonna rip the band-aid off here. Mega Man 8 is not good. It's painfully mediocre at best, and at some points, kinda legitimately awful. The list of things Mega Man 8 gets right is very, very short. Like Mega Man 7, the visuals and sound have been appropriately updated to suit the PS1. I don't really like the art direction of Mega Man 8, I think it's too highly saturated with ungodly colors, but the new design of Mega Man and the designs of many of the Robot Masters are at least visually appealing. And I have to give it props for the soundtrack as well. It doesn't all hit the mark, but songs like Frostman Stage and Aquaman Stage are freaking excellent. I could listen to Frostman Stage in particular for hours, and that's a good thing because you could very well be stuck on this level for hours. The level design in Mega Man 8 is fucking agonizing. I appreciate the effort put forth in trying to make new unique types of levels that have some never before seen types of set pieces, but mother of God! For example, Frostman Stage has this annoying snowboard section that returns for no goddamn reason in the Wily Stages. Tengu Man Stage inexplicably becomes a 2D shooter that also returns for no reason in the Wily Stages. Swordman Stage is a fucking gauntlet that reminds me of one of the worst stages from Yoshi's Island, and Astro Man is quite possibly the single worst Robot Master level in the entire series. A fucking looping maze and disappearing platforms? Seriously? Oh, and how about those fucking boss fights, eh? Aquaman is bullshit, Astro Man is a pain, this stupid 2D shooter boss can blow me, oh look, another devil boss, and this disaster forces you to use the goddamn Mega Ball to fight it. Oh, and how about that asinine final boss that you have to do in one go in a game without any E-tanks? I haven't been this legitimately mad at a video game in a while. Mega Man 8 feels like every stupid idea thrown at the wall was actually kept, and the end product is a game overwrought with stupid, gimmicky levels and fuck annoying boss fights. Oh, and how about that voice acting? That's good shit. Mega Man 8 in my eyes is easily the classic series' lowest point, but it's also the only one that I'd consider actively bad. Sure, the other games have bad moments in them, silly level design choices, annoying boss fights, unmemorable music, what have you, but from this point of the list onward, things are looking up. But only slightly for now. While not outright bad, and I have to give it some leeway for being the first game in the series, Mega Man 1 leaves a lot to be desired. Even for a first outing, Mega Man 1 is shockingly lacking in polish, like level design for instance. The number of cheap enemy placements and beginner's traps in this game is higher than any other game in the series, and some of the design is straight up sloppy. For example, this opening area in Electman Stage is a frankly bizarre obstacle that never should have made it into the final game. It's way too touchy and specific. Even for Mega Man standards, the number of times where you're asked to learn by dying is way too high. You can really feel the age when playing this one, if that makes any sense. Like, okay, take the bosses for example. The kinds of things you're asked to dodge and the response time required for for some of these is borderline inhuman. I know there's people who can do no-hit runs of Mega Man games like it's no big deal, but in the case of Mega Man 1, I genuinely have to wonder how you even do that. Fireman and Electman in particular feel half-assed. The way they shoot their projectiles makes it feel like you have to resort to eating up shots and just hoping you survive. And yeah, we all know about the Yellow Devil by now. Thankfully, that pause glitch was retained in the Legacy Collection, so I was able to beat it without taking a scratch, but I shouldn't have to resort to a glitch to beating a boss. On the plus side, when it's not being annoying, it is a genuinely fun action platformer and a good basis for the rest of the series. And even on the first attempt, they nailed that soundtrack. It's amazing that to this day, it still remains one of gaming's most iconic soundtracks. Even with some of the later games having soundtracks that I personally think are stronger, the staying power of these tunes is unmatched. He was called Rockman for a reason. Mega Man 5 is next, and while we're still on the lower side of the list, it's a fair few steps up from the last couple of games. 5 is one of the last games on the series on the NES, and you can definitely see that on the technical level. The look of the levels and the sound design are among the best in the NES collection, but I do have a caveat with the sound design. Despite sounding more advanced at a technical level, the depth of the sound is something I have to give them props for. Mega Man 5 is what I personally consider the weakest soundtrack in the series. They go more for ambiance than memorability, and this isn't necessarily a bad thing, but unfortunately it doesn't really work for Mega Man if you ask me. Mega Man's music to me is all about the catchy tunes, so these more soft-spoken tracks don't really do it for me. On the other hand, Mega Man 5 has a very strong set of robot masters and stages. They don't all have this, but many of the stages have unique set pieces that match up with their aesthetics rather than just being obstacles for the sake of it. Wave Man has the jet ski, Gravity Man has the gravity flip from time to time, Starman's stage has low gravity since it's in space, so on and so forth. It's good stuff, though it creates contrast with the stages that don't have such memorable set pieces, especially the Proto Man stages, which are largely unremarkable. You know, largely unremarkable is a good phrase for most of this game, actually. This is probably the weakest set of weapons yet, the soundtrack is just not very good, and while the introduction of collectibles does add replayability, in my opinion, it was clumsily implemented. If nothing else, this game introduced the Mega Buster that would become the standard for the series moving forward. Buster only runs are a hell of a lot more fun in this game because of how overpowered it is. Damn, that's nice. Mega Man 3 is a game I'm very conflicted on, mostly because of its legacy. For many Mega Man fans, this sits near, if not at the top of their lists, only ever beaten out by Mega Man 2. And I've played this one a few times in the past. I remember thoroughly enjoying it when I was younger, but now, a lot of this game kind of pisses me off. So let me just say, the level design for the most part is fucking solid. For the first core of the game, the stages are fun and full of great aesthetic and set pieces. Usually they're weird as hell too, and I kinda like that. Like, Snake Man's stage is literally made of snakes. It's so odd. Magnet Man's stage comes to mind as a perfect blending of aesthetic and mechanics. There's plenty of machinery riddled throughout, and a lot of the stage revolves around magnetism, dragging you up or to the sides to make the platforming challenges more difficult. Even the fight with Magnet Man himself does this. The entire package is kind of brilliant. And good god, the soundtrack on this one is just ace. After a couple of games, they started to really figure out the NES sound chip and make one of the series' most memorable soundtracks. Proto Man's theme is just mwah. And another thing, the addition of the slide. I don't feel like it did much for this game. I don't think they knew 100% how to take advantage of it yet, but when it was used right, I really enjoyed having it. The more tools in your arsenal, the better in my opinion. I fronted this segment saying Mega Man 3 pissed me off a lot, and that comes in right about here. So Mega Man 3 is the first game in the series where this is done. To make them a bit longer, most Mega Man games from 3 onward have extra levels and such thrown in. It rarely feels like padding, and I will almost always take more game than less, but in the case of 3, they mishandled this big time. This segment before the end game, the Doc Robot stages, is fucking garbage. Between reusing old level assets for blatant padding and 8 awful recreations of bosses from Mega Man 2, this is where the game went from one of the best to one of the most goddamn agonizing to play. The rest of the end game couldn't do anything to save it, especially not with a final boss this fucking bad. I have a lot of smaller problems with Mega Man 3 as well. The menu is cumbersome, the weapons all feel really lame, most of the bosses suck because they move too fast and do too much contact damage, but really it is the end game that fucks everything up. With the massive nosedive right at the Doc Robot stages being a hard pill to swallow, the game's consistency is really its biggest weakness. The rock-solid final game in the NES saga. Coming up next on the ranking is Mega Man 6. Solid is the best single word to describe this one, because while its highs admittedly aren't as high as some of the other Mega Man games, I do find 6 is extremely well-rounded. The OST isn't the most memorable of the lot, but it is a fair step up from 5. The depth of the sound is just as rich, but this time they strike a better blend of catchy melodies and thematic ambiance. Speaking of which, the theming in this game on the whole is really strong. I like that the different parts of the world are all aesthetically appropriate and that their respective Robot Master meshes well with that theme, even if a couple of them are a bit on the nose. On the subject of levels, these were a lot of fun. Many of the levels have appropriate set pieces like the Ignitable Oil and Flame Man stage or the Fans and Windman stage. They also did well dialing back on the collectibles for Mega Man 5, and the branching paths provided by the rush adapters adds a lot to the game if you ask me. The rush adapters are probably my favorite part of this game. The abilities it provides adds a new depth to the base gameplay, allowing you to hover in the case of the jet mode or sacrifice range for extra oomph in the case of power mode. Switching between these modes in Mega Man's base form on the fly made some levels, especially in the end game, really fun to play. Speaking of the end game, I found myself really enjoying the final boss for once. Don't know what it was, I just thought it was really fun. On the whole, I really enjoyed Mega Man 6. The unique elements of this game made it stand apart from other games in the series in a way that isn't wholly intrusive, and apart from that, it just feels really polished. It's well-rounded, it's unique, and it ended the NES stretch of the series in stride. I was very, very surprised with just how much I enjoyed Mega Man 4. It's one of those games where I was so wrapped up in playing the game that I couldn't be bothered to take hardly any notes. That said, I'm not lacking in things to talk about. The first thing that stuck out to me with this one is the phenomenal soundtrack. It's a bizarre, experimental sound that falls just short of the technical advancements present in 5 and 6, but it makes up for this by having some of the catchiest songs in the NES saga. This might be my favorite soundtrack of the original 6. It was a treat to listen to throughout. One of the things that makes the soundtrack work is how each song just feels suited to the level it's in. Bone Man sounds vaguely punkish, Dust Man sounds desolate, the themes of the levels and the sounds of the music work well together, and I think that's awesome. I feel like these were a natural progression of Mega Man 3's levels that had an emphasis on strong environmental design. The sewers of Toad Man stage, the desert ruins of Pharaoh Man stage, great stuff, and they've all got stage-specific obstacles that basically never repeat. It was genuinely fun to play through all of these stages, and the same applies to the end game as well. I actually really enjoyed the Cossack stages, and Wily's Castle was strong on its own merits as well. After Mega Man 3's insufferable Doc Robot stages, this was a huge step up. Before I finish, I want to talk about the boss order for a second. Many Mega Man games have really dumb boss orders that honestly don't make a lot of sense. There are some token weaknesses that are pretty easy to put together, like fire weapons are going to be good against ice bosses for example, but then there's the weird ones like Spring Man's weapon being good against Shade Man. In the case of this game, the boss weaknesses are absurd, but make a ton of sense in comical fashion. A rainstorm takes out the lights, you dust off a skull, you use a light to uncover a pharaoh's tomb, and my personal favorite, if you drill a toad, it'd be fucking nasty. Just saying, taking this stuff literally is a good system for remembering these things. Mega Man 2 is far and away the most iconic game in the series. The music, the Robot Masters, the weapons. This is a game that's been celebrated for decades by a lot more than just Mega Man fans. It's ingrained into gaming culture. And honestly, it's still a damn good game. When I was an edgy teenager, I tried to act like this was overrated and that the other later Mega Man games afterwards are inherently better because they have more features or are more polished, but frankly, Mega Man 2 set the bar really high really early. Level design is on point. With a handful of exceptions, it doesn't feel cheap. They really did a lot to make the game more fun to play when compared to the original. In fact, Mega Man 2 is largely a much easier game, one of the easiest in the series if you ask me. Granted, a lot of that comes down to just how many times I've played it, but the game feels good to play and seldom feels unfair. The levels are simple, usually comprising of 1 or 2 gimmicks tops, and that makes them easy to learn and rewarding as well. Learning the ins and outs of the levels in any Mega Man game is rewarding, but this game's levels have the simplest layouts, and I feel like that makes them especially fun to learn. And I gotta make a quick mention to one of the things that makes this game so especially fun, the Metal Blade. While the power is definitely part of it, I always found the reason the Metal Blade is so fun to use is because you can aim it in any direction, meaning if you have enemy patterns down to a science, you can snipe them for quick kills. It's something that few other weapons have replicated, although Base does bring it back to a degree in later games. Mega Man 2 is just a damn delight to play through every time. The music is catchy as hell, the levels are simple and fun to blitz through, it's still stood the test of time and aged pretty damn well, all considered, though I can't in good faith put it any higher than this because it takes a massive dip near the end. The Wily levels are mostly fine. I like that they take advantage of the assist items and ask some different things of you, but some of these late game bosses are just fucking bad. The Boo Beam Trap might be the single worst boss in any Mega Man game. It's goddamn insufferable, and I have no idea how it got a pass to the final game. Oh, and as much as I enjoy most of the Robot Master stages, Quickman's lasers and that dumbass disappearing block puzzle and Heatman stage can eat my ass. It's funny to me that Mega Man 2 has such iconic highs as well as equally infamous lows. I mean, people even wrote songs about this shit. That's saying a lot. In recent memory, no game has surprised me more than Mega Man 7. I've played a decent amount of 7 in the past just to kill time, and it never really impressed me, but sitting down to play it front to back, I've come to realize this is one of the best games in the series. The thing that always made me rather dismissive of Mega Man 7 is, like many people, Brentalfloss saying it sucks big dinosaur balls. Okay, in all seriousness, the shift in graphical style always made me feel hesitant, as I was worried that it would adversely affect the game feel. Mega Man 7's sprites are bigger, and as such it's a bit more compact than other Mega Man games, but that hardly affects how it plays at all. I was surprised at just how tight the controls are. It feels smooth, and Mega Man's weight feels natural. And that tight gameplay is important when you're looking at some of the strongest levels in classic Mega Man. I say that with no exaggeration. The levels in Mega Man 7 are some of the strongest in the series, both in mechanical and aesthetic design. They mastered the set pieces on this one, coming up with levels that are visually striking and also packed with thematically appropriate challenges. Burst Man stage has 2 different kinds of water that change the physics, Cloud Man stage has different weather effects that influence how difficult the invisible platforms are to handle. I could go on, these levels are great, but admittedly sometimes they can get a little too busy. Turbo Man stage, for instance, is bloated with different gimmicks. Like, okay, we start with this dozer, and then there's a section with bouncy tires, and then there's a section with different timed flames you have to dodge, and then there's a section with Quickman style instant death fire beams, and then there's a truck mini boss, and then you reach the end of the stage. Whew, man, that's exhausting. And while we're on the subject of levels, I gotta talk about the presentation on this one. Where Mega Man X was an evolution of the series look to be cooler and edgier, Mega Man 7 takes the cuter art style of classic Mega Man and brings it to 16-bit with grace. The look is clean, the sprites are detailed and surprisingly expressive, and the music kicks ass. It's not all super memorable, but when the music in this game nails it, it fucking nails it. Mega Man looks and sounds awesome in 16-bit. It's a damn shame this style was never revisited. Huge plus for this game is the addition of the Super Adapter. The power and jet modes for Mega Man 6 have been merged into one set of armor, and that makes the second half of this game just buckets of fun to play. You do have to know your way around to find it, but unlike Beat, I feel like this is actually worth your time to seek out, even if you do have to resort to a guide. It's especially fun for this game's Wily Stages, which are in my opinion one of the strongest endgames in the series to date, although it falls apart at the very last minute with one of the series' most unfair and unfun bosses in the final phase of the final boss. Like, damn, what a disappointing note to go out on. Alright, I've been going on for a bit longer than I should, so I'll cap this here. Mega Man 7 is fucking ace, and I can't believe I slept on it for so long. It was an excellent step forward to a new generation for Mega Man, even if the series would eventually take steps backwards in the coming decade. I know I just made light of Mega Man taking steps backwards, but let me be clear. I don't think Mega Man 9 and 10 are any worse for going back to basics. Hell, by process of elimination, they're the only 2 left to talk about. Obviously, I don't think anything less of them. I can sit here and bemoan the lack of sliding and charge shots all the livelong day, but that doesn't change the fact that Mega Man 9 and 10 are insanely tight, polished, and fun. Hell, I'd make the argument that taking those steps backwards did them more good than anything. All that said, let's take a look at Mega Man's return to form, Mega Man 9. Here's a behind the scenes fact for y'all. Playing Mega Man 9 for this marathon was actually the first time I ever played it. I never had a PS3 or Xbox 360, and during the WiiWare days, I only ever bought Mega Man 10. I wanted to play Mega Man 9 for a long time, and really it was the only incentive I needed to pick up the Legacy Collection too. Tack on the fact that I was playing this game during this marathon and I had just finished Mega Man 8, I was so ready to play Mega Man 9 it hurt. It may have taken me a decade to finally get around to playing it, but holy fuck. Mega Man 9 excels in almost every facet. The Robot Master stages are just hit after hit. Splash Woman offers an excellent take on the classic water level. Galaxy Man's little UFO friends are gonna take you for a ride. Tornado Man stage has its magnetic platforms and weather effects. Man! The levels are fun as hell and hard to to boot, and the tight gameplay makes every death feel deserved and every victory feel earned. It's up to you to make the right calls, the right jumps, and the right shots. God, it feels good to play! Another great thing about 9 is that every weapon has a secondary function beyond killing their specified robot master. The laser trident can pierce shields, the tornado blow gives your jumps more altitude, the concrete shot creates little platforms, so on and so on and so forth. Legit, the only one here I never found use for is the plug ball. I was actively looking for opportunities to use more than just the Mega Buster in this game, and I can't say that about many other games in the series. Wily Fortress puts your knowledge of how to use these weapons to the test. I love the final stages in this game. There's some low points here and there. The Double Devil is a grade A awful boss fight, but the challenges you're presented with and being asked to use all of your tools made for a uniquely fun endgame. I'll top this off with the soundtrack, and I can't overstate this enough, this is some of the best tunes in the series. If I had to put it in a word, it'd be whoa. In a few more words, holy fuck, the soundtrack is amazing. Concrete Man's theme made me shit myself from hype, Splash Woman and Jewel Man have smooth, jazzy stage themes, and Tornado Man's stage gave me a fucking religious experience. God, I love Mega Man! And Mega Man 10 takes the top of the list. I've been talking a lot about what I value in different Mega Man games throughout the preceding segments. The soundtrack, the level design, the additional ways of play that make some of the games more unique, and the most important aspect, how it feels to play. Mega Man 10 may not be a fan favorite by any means, but it's absolutely my favorite for ticking every box and coming out as the total package. I haven't talked about this up until now, but Mega Man 10 excels in one of the most critical aspects of Mega Man's design, the stupidity. Now look, I love Mega Man, and it's not like the series doesn't play it straight when it comes to its gameplay, but one of my favorite things about Mega Man as a series is that the games can be really dumb. The hackneyed stories that play out as self-parodies, the impractical robot designs, many of its environments. You can't tell me that the team behind Mega Man 3 looked at Top Man's goofy face, his silly-ass level, and the robot cats that shoot robot fleas, and were taking that 100% seriously. Nah, Mega Man's always been a little dumb, and 10 is like the logical extreme. Mega Man 10 has a story revolving around fucking robot flu, a level set in a baseball stadium, and a robot master literally made out of swords. It's reveling in the goofiness established by previous games, and I tip my hat to that. Level design is on point throughout. I've said it a lot, and 10 is no exception. They really nailed the blend of aesthetics and mechanics that make Mega Man's levels so damn good. Man's got disappearing blocks and chargeable platforms, Nitro Man's got streets full of trucks, Commando Man has those wild sandstorms, and keeping with 9 and 10's theme of sticking to basics, these levels tend not to overcomplicate things. They aren't busy with different gimmicks, and very importantly, they don't feel cheap. Now yes, there are those moments that every Mega Man game has, especially during the end game, but like with Mega Man 9, I felt that most of the deaths were my fault and not the game pulling the rug out from underneath of me. I'd be remiss without talking about the soundtrack, and god damn. If I had to nitpick Mega Man 9's soundtrack, I'd say that the level themes don't really match the themes of the levels. On the flip side, Mega Man 10 doesn't compromise. It perfectly balances making the music both thematically appropriate and infectiously fun to listen to. All of this probably would have been enough, but Mega Man 10 went beyond. With multiple difficulty levels and playable characters, Mega Man 10 becomes one of the most replayable games in the series. I've lost count of how many times I've played through this game, and really that isn't just because of the options. They certainly help, and playing as bass is fun as shit, but what it really comes down to is that this game is just really fun to play. Front to back, I've enjoyed playing this one game more than any other classic Mega Man. Full disclosure, this was a foregone conclusion from the start for me. I've loved this game for years, and even after playing through and reflecting on every other Mega Man game, I'm happy to put it at the top of my ranking of the classic Mega Man games. This has been Idio Noben, and thank you for joining me on this retrospective of one of my favorite series in gaming. And for those of you wondering whether or not I'll do this with the Mega Man X games, fuck no.